Canada is a Club Med for terrorists. Wow, that is a seriously jarring quote, isn't it? It was actually spoken by Texas Congressman Lamar Smith, and honestly, it perfectly sets the stage for the incredibly high stakes and the highly controversial nature of the document we are unpacking today. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, our goal is to impartially and neutrally unpack a really provocative manual titled Waging War from Canada by Mike Pearson. Now, just to be clear right up front, we aren't here to take sides or endorse any viewpoints. Instead, we're going to look objectively at the arguments, the systemic loopholes, and the strategic blueprint laid out in this text. It is a fascinating, if somewhat unsettling, look at how an open, democratic society might be viewed through the incredibly cynical lens of a tactical operative. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with a base for global insurgency, then move to terrorist activity on Canadian soil, look at why Canada is the target, unpack the Highway 401 strategy, and finally, wrap up with exploiting the political landscape. Part 1. A base for global insurgency. To start off, we really have to address the core paradox of this manual. Internationally, Canada has a well-earned reputation as a polite, peaceful, and incredibly welcoming nation. But the author's central premise flips that entirely on its head. In Waging War from Canada, what's absolutely vital to understand right out of the gate is the author's perspective. In the introduction, Pearson explicitly states that he makes literally no judgments on the causes of any organizations. He writes that terms like terrorist, freedom fighter, and operative are used completely interchangeably in the manual. He approaches this purely as a strategic how-to guide, basically claiming that regardless of whether a cause is just or not, Canada provides the perfect environment to advance it. Moving on to Part 2. Terrorist activity on Canadian soil. The text makes it super clear that this isn't just some theoretical exercise. The author provides historical context, arguing that this is a realized, ongoing tactic. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scope of what the manual is talking about. The author points to a huge, diverse array of international conflicts allegedly spilling over onto Canadian soil. You have Al-Qaeda, with the author highlighting Ahmed Rassam, who was actually caught smuggling 100 pounds of liquid explosives from Canada to the U.S. in 1999. The text notes he originally arrived in Canada as a refugee claimant. Then there's Babar Khalsa and the tragic Air India flight bombing, which the text morbidly refers to as one of the most successful military operations conducted from Canada. The manual also claims Hezbollah suspects use Canadian universities for cover. And, perhaps most shockingly, it alleges that the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam actually had a high-ranking commander hired as a translator to assist an RCMP investigation into their own activities. The author uses these examples to prove his thesis. Everyone from everywhere is allegedly using the space. Part 3. Why Canada is the target. So if we accept the author's premise that these activities are happening, the next logical question is, well, why? What are the systemic reasons Canada's chosen? The manual outlines 4 distinct systemic advantages. First up, fundraising. The author points out that Canada lacks an equivalent to the American Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. This means front groups can potentially register as charities and raise money tax-free from sympathetic expatriate communities. Second is safe haven. The text highlights Canada's highly generous refugee program, claiming individuals can arrive from anywhere, claim status, and receive immediate legal and economic assistance, with deportation orders allegedly rarely enforced. Third is fragmented operational support, which we're going to look at closer in just a second. And fourth, proximity. You have a massive, wealthy nation sharing a 4,000-mile undefended border with the United States. According to the author, this makes it custom-made for smuggling and launching operations against American targets while hiding safely in a different legal jurisdiction. I want to pause on this quote from the text regarding that third point on policing. The author writes that communication among them is poor. They often refuse to cooperate. You see, Canada doesn't have a single overarching intelligence agency quite like the CIA. Instead, intelligence and policing are divided up among dozens of civilian, military, municipal, and provincial bodies. The manual argues that insurgents exploit this fragmentation, basically slipping through the cracks because these various Canadian agencies are allegedly bogged down by parochialism and a reluctance to share intelligence with one another. All right, Part 4, the Highway 401 strategy. Having laid out the why, the manual shifts into practical advice, bringing us to a highly specific geographical blueprint for operatives. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the strict dichotomy the author draws here. Canada is world famous for its massive, beautiful wilderness, right? but the manual explicitly warns operatives to stay far, far away from it. Rural areas are framed as a total danger zone. They're sparsely populated, and according to the text, newcomers stand out like a sore thumb. The author's ideal operational zone is entirely different. The urban centers along Highway 401, stretching from Windsor to Quebec City, specifically targeting Toronto and Montreal. These cities are incredibly diverse, meaning operatives can easily blend in among newcomers from all over the world. Plus, the 401 corridor holds the country's wealth for fundraising, the international airports, and the communication infrastructure needed to wage information warfare. The author drives this geographical lesson home with some very specific anecdotes. He details how Ahmed Rassam, who he actually refers to in a section titled Hillbilly Jihad, was caught specifically because he tried to cross into America at a quiet, rural border post rather than a busy urban one. He also recounts a story where Sikh operatives allegedly tested bomb technology in a backwater town in the Rocky Mountains, only to be easily observed by Canadian intelligence simply because they were operating in the middle of nowhere. The message to the reader is crystal clear. The wilderness is a trap, the concrete jungle of the 401 is where you hide. And finally, Part 5, Exploiting the Political Landscape. For our final section, we look at how the manual instructs its readers to navigate and, frankly, exploit the democratic system itself. It offers a very pragmatic, almost cynical breakdown of Canada's political parties at the time. So the crucial point is how the author views the Liberal Party. Because this party historically works hard to attract the immigrant and non-white vote, the manual advises insurgents to ensure their expatriate communities contribute to and publicly support them. The text asserts that because the ruling party holds political control over police and intelligence agencies, staying in their good graces is absolutely essential for groups hoping to openly organize, fundraise, and just generally avoid crackdowns. Conversely, the manual addresses the right-wing opposition of the era, the Canadian Reform Alliance Party. The text views this party as highly hostile to operatives, noting their strong law and order streak. The author warns that if this party were to form a government, Canada would become a much, much harder place to operate out of. However, the manual coldly calculates that this is mathematically unlikely to happen, claiming the party cannot win in French-speaking districts or areas with high immigrant populations. Therefore, the text advises operatives to be aware of them, but not to really fear them taking power. The author rounds out his political strategy by looking at the remaining parties. The Bloc Québécois, seeking Quebec's independence, is viewed as a useful ally because they're openly subversive to the federal government, though operatives are warned not to get too close as they are heavily monitored by the RCMP. Finally, the New Democratic Party, or NDP, is identified as a valuable tool. While the manual notes they won't form a government, it calls them the conscience of Parliament. It suggests that kicking in a few $100s to a local candidate could be highly useful if an organization needs politicians to publicly question whether a police crackdown is racially motivated or unfair. So what does this all mean? This brings us to a rather profound and definitely unsettling question drawn directly from our analysis of this manual. Do the very freedoms, the open immigration policies, the diverse cities, and the democratic protections that define a free society become the exact tools used by operatives to exploit it? This text certainly argues they do, painting Canada's greatest virtues as its most exploitable weaknesses. It's a complex, challenging look at security in the modern world, and it leaves us with plenty to think about long after this explainer is over. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpacked this fascinating document.